African Book Development Council says that only 14% of South Africans are regular book readers. And get this, only 1% of those are regular book buyers. That's some food for thought, don't you think? Well, last night, a former journalist and now author, Mandla Langa, launched his latest novel, The Texture of Shadows. And he launched this at the Constitution Hill. His publishers have praised this book, saying it's the best work yet. Mr. Langa joins us now in studio. A very warm welcome to Morning Live. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hot on the heels of Lost Colors of the Chameleon comes this book now, The Texture of Shadows. Tell us about the journey in between the two.
In between the two, one of the biggest things that has happened is that I had to look at our history. I had to look at the fact that every day there are developments which resonate, which hark back to the past, which hark back to the fact that there might be some things that we're forgetting that were very important in our development as a people in this country.
Now, it is a fiction book. It's a work of fiction, but it is set on factual events and surroundings here in South Africa. Why did you choose to go that route?
Because I thought that 1989, where this thing starts, is a year that was very difficult for the liberation movement, in the sense that there was the closure of many institutions. The so-called Soviet bloc was coming to an end. The Berlin Wall fell, and the liberation movement had to start and think very clearly how to move forward. And so it's a story of guerrillas from MK, although I call it People's Army because I do not want, at the end of the day, to be sued by MK, who infiltrated into South Africa to bring into South Africa certain material which would take them on to be able to deal with the capacitation of the struggle inside.
A former journalist, a former board member here at the SABC with a wealth of institutional knowledge and know-how. Does that somehow lend itself to your work of fiction?
Well, it allows me time, I think, to research. It allows me possibilities to phone people. It allows me to reach into possibly the other areas which maybe a lot of people would not have access to. So the most important thing with writing is time. If you can marshal that, if you can steal that, if you can, yeah, that's what you need.
Because one would think that that's a contradiction. One would expect you to write about the life and times of our political scene at the moment. But what do you want people to take home from reading this book? What sort of mental image do you want to leave with them?
The mental image, the most important thing about this book is that the main protagonist is a woman. She's a chaplain, she's a trained guerrilla, and she's the spirit, you know, behind the success of the mission. What I'm trying to say here is that we have, as a people, forgotten the role that women have played in the struggle. And it's not only her, it's not only the main protagonist, but other women who are, you know, secondary players in the story, who are also very, very important.
I couldn't agree with you more. I was just doing a little bit of research also about the labor movement and the role of women there and how poorly it's being reflected in these days. But let's take a look now about the culture of reading in South Africa. I know in Maponya Mall there was a huge uproar over a bookstore that was closing down there because Africans were simply not reading. They were not buying the books. The African language books were not selling. They had to close down. What do you have to say about the culture of reading, or the lack thereof, I should say?
That's a very important question, in the sense that there used to be this whole thing of saying that if you want to hide something from a black person, put it in a book. I believe that we do need to find a way, you know, to pull all stops, to make sure that we reinstitute the culture of reading, because it was there before. I don't know what happened in the meantime, in the interim period. That's one. But secondly, we need to capacitate writers in this country. There needs to be a lot more writers, you know, literary prizes in indigenous languages also, because that has, you know, that tap has run dry. And we need to make sure that people start thinking about diverting some of their preoccupations with some of the luxury stuff that they buy. You know, a book at most costs about 230 rands. How many pints of beer are those, you know, and so on and so forth. We need to rejig our minds and our memories.
And do you think content also has a role to play? I remember growing up and going to Model C schools, and some of the books there I just simply couldn't relate to. Your Sam and Betty and how they walk with their mom and dad, and the doggy is there with them. It didn't speak to me as a township girl. Do we perhaps need to take a look at the content in the books so that we do start nurturing a reading generation from when they're young? We need to tweak somehow the content so that it's relatable.
Well, I mean, if you look at South Africa is a place of stories. There's so much in the everyday happenings in this country that should inspire us, that should act as our muse. We've just spoken of women. I would like to write a story that is just about women only, because I think that these are things that have sustained us throughout time. So, yes, you are right, the content, not about snow and daffodils and foxes and wolves, or werewolves.
But I think this book is very telling as well, because you take us back to a part of our history, but you take our mind on a journey, on a trip with fictitious characters. Very lastly, where can we get the book?
The book is available everywhere. It's also available as an e-book. So people that believe in that can buy it. But I believe that people should just go and buy the book at the bookstores.
Love it. Thank you so much for making yourself available to speak to us. And I must commend you on the title of the book. Immediately when I read it, The Texture of Shadows, I immediately did this think, what sort of texture would shadows have in my mind's eye? Would it be corduroy? Would it be silk? Would it be satin? What is the texture of shadows? And you'll have to find out when you do get yourself a copy of the book. The Texture of Shadows from Mandla Langa, former journalist and now turned author. Also one of the board members of the SABC, former, I should say. But thank you so very much for having joined us. Congratulations on the book.
Thank you very much.
Have a good day further. And thank you for having watched the interview. Get yourself a copy of this book. Let's be a reading nation and a reading generation. Quick ad break. More when we come back.